Since our glazing section is totally dry at this point, we are ready to go back in and add our second layer, which is actually going to create this technique number 6 glazing. So with my watercolor paints, what I'll want to do is I'll want to mix up a color. I can always mix it up in the lid of my paint palette, which I like to do because then you can really control how saturated your color is. Again, you can always add water to make the color lighter, or you can use more directly paint to make it darker. And with my color, I'm just going to begin to paint a layer over top. And I'm going to probably choose 2 or 3 different colors. With glazing, you don't want to work back over it too many times because it may pick up the paint from underneath. You can see I got a little bit of a purple smudge there. It's not really that big of a deal, but it'll generally be best if you go over it fewer times, if you just do maybe one stroke of a color. Here I'm going in with a red, you can see. And what I like about this is you can see how the red looks compared to the colors underneath it, and you can see the color itself in these white spaces that we left between our stripes. Maybe I'll do one more layer down here. I'll make a diluted gray by mixing the black with some water. And again, you can see what happens. So glazing is a really great way to layer different colors over each other. That's technique number 6. To set up for technique number 7, which is called dry brush, we're going to actually need to make sure we have some of our paints slightly wet, but we'll want to dry off our paintbrush for this. So I'm going to start always by wiping it on the side of my water container. If I tap it, it could make little droplets that could get on my artwork or someone else's. So I'm never tapping my brush, instead I'm wiping it off to remove any water. And then it can also be helpful if you have a little piece of paper towel to go back in and gently squeegee any remaining water out of it. We want to dry off our paintbrush as much as possible for this technique called dry brush, since predictably we do need our brush to be pretty dry. So when you can gently sort of feel the bristles and you can see them start to slightly come apart, we'll know our brush is dry enough for this technique to work. Of course, we never want to separate the bristles really far by pressing the brush down. That can lead to damage to the brush over time. So I've got my paintbrush, which has been dried off. I've got my spot, and I've got some paint. With my paintbrush, I'm just going to lightly touch the tip to the paint and then begin to make some strokes. Now, you'll notice the difference between dry brush and some of the other techniques. We can actually see a lot of the paper, and it looks very soft and very fuzzy. This technique is great for adding fur to an animal if you're painting one. You can see even by going back over that same section again, it creates a nice texture. If you were doing this with a green or a brown, it can be great for creating grasses. So you can experiment with how different sections of dry brush are going to look. Our final section, number 8, is called Resist. And for this, we'll need something like a white oil pastel, a white crayon. Other creative supplies you could use would even be like a candle, something that's wax or oil based that's going to resist the water covering it. So in the art room, we're going to use a white oil pastel. They work super well. And I'm just going to draw really any design that I want to. Obviously, you can't see it right now because we're working white on white. If you tilt the paper as you're working, sometimes you can then see the faint outline of what you're doing if you're struggling to see it. But again, what you're putting on here doesn't really matter so much. The idea is more that we'll see the picture we're drawing once we add the watercolor. So I've got a little design that I've drawn with the white oil pastel. Now I'm going to take some watercolor, again, particularly for Resist. If you've added some water, that's really going to help this one. Maybe I'll even make a unique color mix by adding some color to my grayish black color. Of course, I don't want to put my brush directly into one of these paints because that would mix up the paint set. So I'm going to wash it in my water first. Then I can go get another color, so I'm not muddying up the paints that we're sharing. Now I've got this dark, dark, dark purple color. I'm going to take it and begin to paint. And as you see, Once I paint, it's revealing my design. I like to wash off my brush in between finishing this one because sometimes it picks up the little bits of oil pastel, and washing it off will help your paint continue to create this technique most effectively. So you should see your lines become revealed as you paint. If you're not seeing them, what might be happening is it might be that your paint doesn't have enough water mixed in, because if you paint straight from the pan, sometimes it can literally sit on top of the oil pastel and not fully reveal the design. So make sure you're getting some water mixed in so that we can actually see your design revealed. Also, if you paint back and forth over top of it too many times, sometimes it will start to cover it. It should usually poke through. So if that starts to happen, you can again also go back into your water, pick up a little bit of water, and collect up those paints that are beading along the surface so you can hopefully reveal your design. And that's technique number 8, resist. This can be really good if you have a small detail that you want to keep white and you don't have access to other watercolor things like masking. That's a different technique that we're not talking about. And it's just a fun way to create pattern and texture in your artwork. So all together we have our 8 techniques. Technique 1, wash. Technique 2, gradient wash. Technique 3, wet on wet. Technique 4, wet on dry. Technique 5, lifting. Technique 6, glazing or layering. Technique 7, dry brush. And Technique 8, resist. Great job!